So last session of the day is going to be Holly Blood from ICA to talk about some really cool data-related stuff if you haven't heard enough. So thanks for sticking around. I know that you guys are shuffling in and out for your meetings. That's awesome. After her talk, again, I'm going to be doing for about 15 minutes travel reimbursement stuff, so feel free to bring me your receipts. Also, don't forget about house finance tonight. It's the 5th floor of the Capitol building. Just take the elevator all the way up, go right, and just keep going right until you can't anymore, and you'll end up in house finance. So only 2 minutes, it's easy, and then you can go try out, our brew pub or something, afterwards and celebrate. So, all right, cool. So without further ado, here's Holly.
Hey, everybody. I don't know. I always have height issues. I feel like I need a stool when I'm up here. Okay, so this is going to be a little more informal, and I invite you to ask questions, raise hands, ask questions as I'm going through this. One of the biggest issues I see as a system administrator for the Alaska HMIS is that people feel like it's a big beast. They don't know how to access it. They don't know what happens to their data once it gets put into the system, and so it feels really overwhelming, I think, for a lot of people, especially for the smaller organizations who just don't know what to do with it. They know they have to put their data in HMIS, but after it goes in, they don't know. And so I want to make sure that I work for Institute for Community Alliances. We are the HMIS lead for the Alaska HMIS, and we are very accessible. We have a team of report writers. The HMIS director, Alyssa Parrish, she has access and is knowledgeable in the Tableau software, which is a way to really doctor up your data, basically, and make it better for advocacy in your community with stakeholders and funders, and just in general to educate the general population within your communities. So I just want to go over a little bit about what the data is telling us and where to find it. Jasmine and Brian both went over this a little bit today, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of it, but I do want to just give you a walkthrough of where to get this data. First of all, what is HMIS? I think most of you in this room already know what the Homeless Management Information System is. It is a database mandated by HUD. If you're receiving any kind of COC or HUD funding streams, you have to put your data in HMIS. A lot of people voluntarily put their data in because it is a shared statewide secure database, and so it benefits a lot of organizations to participate because a lot of their clients are shared clients across the state. And as we know, a lot of our clients are transient, especially Anchorage, Kenai, Anchorage, Matsu Valley, and even Fairbanks, and then of course all along Southeast. So I think it's really beneficial to folks to use it if you have the internal capacity to do so within your organization. So who uses it? I already mentioned this. These are all of the grantees that could potentially be using it. These are the ones that are required by HUD to enter into HMIS. So ESG, BHAP, we've talked about all day, SNUG grantees, RI, the VA. So we have all of our SSVF data going in there. PATH recipients. So for those of you who don't know what PATH is, it's the Projects for Assistance in Transition from Homelessness. PATH, obviously, is easier to say. And this is Street Outreach and Supportive Services. And there's an organization, a PATH-funded organization in Fairbanks as well as in Anchorage. So it's No Limits in Fairbanks and Choices in Anchorage. As well as HOPWA, so Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, any COC grant recipients, YHDP recipients, and then, of course, like I mentioned, organizations who voluntarily enter. And those who do voluntarily enter data into HMIS, anyone who enters in the system has to they have to meet a standard. So you have to put in like these basic universal data elements, what we call UDEs. And the universal data elements are just basically basic demographic, basic client demographics. So name, date of birth, gender, ethnicity, race, if you identify with one. If you're a head of household or if you're a member of a household, the COC that you're part of, so whether you're Balance of State or Anchorage, and then prior living situation questions, which is, and disabling condition, that's one. It's a yes-no client self-report question. But the prior living situation is HUD's way of, we call it, internally with ICA, we call it the 3.917. I don't expect you guys to remember that, but in the HUD data standards, that's what they're called. And so the questions are, where did you sleep last night? How long have you been in that situation? Before that, how long were you in that situation? And you're trying to figure out, walk back with clients to figure out how long they've been experiencing homelessness, if they are currently experiencing homelessness. And so then after that, we ask how many episodes of homelessness they've experienced in the past 36 months. And then after that, we ask how many months total have you experienced homelessness. All of those data elements combined will help us learn if a person is not only experiencing homelessness, but if they're experiencing chronic homelessness. And we've talked today a little bit about the definition of homelessness and how it varies, from person to person, entity to entity. But we're talking about specifically the HUD-defined version of homelessness. So what is it used for? And it can be used for a lot of things. For most people, it's just reporting. Like, they have to do it, so they use it for that purpose. In fact, we just recently, part of the strategic plan that the advisory board's been going over, one of the introductions in that strategic plan is putting out surveys after we train a new user in the system, and asking them, like, what do you get out of HMIS? And one of the options they can answer is, I don't know, I don't care, I don't like using HMIS, which is often the case. And I'm here to help mediate that. So one of the things, or many of the things that HMIS is used for is case management. Because it is now a statewide shared system, so client data is auto-shared in the system unless a client opts out of data sharing. So it can streamline and make case management with specific clients more efficient. So for instance, if you're in Anchorage, if you're a client in Anchorage and you're working with a case manager at Catholic Social Services, maybe that case manager will see that you've previously been staying at Fairbanks Rescue Mission, or maybe you've been down in Southeast somewhere. And so you can see how clients are transient and what maybe other organizations have done or attempted to do to help those clients. And all of that data lives in HMIS for the organizations who serve that client who are participating in HMIS. It's also used for data analysis. Of course, all day we've been hearing HMIS data, essentially. I mean, there are other sources of data that we've used today, but for the most part, we've used a lot of HMIS data. We also use it just to assess a client's need and be able to connect them to the services that they need. So we just talked about rapid rehousing. Sometimes HMIS is used, of course, for assessing clients for coordinated entry. And so we're able to determine maybe they need rapid rehousing, maybe permanent supportive housing, but HMIS is used to be able to evaluate what a client's needs are. Also for funding, of course, without the data, you don't have the funding. And then implementing change. All of this data is used locally within our own communities. Our own chambers of commerce use it. Our own cities use this information to make decisions about housing and homelessness. But also our state legislators, which is what we're doing today. This is what this is all about. And also our federal legislators. So all of this data ends up in the hands of our United States representatives and our United States senators. And if it's not robust data, if it's not data or quality data, we're not giving them accurate information, basically, to make decisions for our state and for all of the states. So how does it work? Well, it's a collaborative effort between the two COCs and ICA and an advisory board and all of the funders and stakeholders and all of the organizations who participate in HMIS. It takes a lot of people to make this database robust and to make it work and to make it teach us and inform us about what clients need across the state. And these are just our logos, which, yeah, you know. Why does the data matter? It matters because of funding. It's directly related to our funding. So if the data is not robust, if we're not entering it into the system or a system that can give us the reports that we need to go to our funders and stakeholders, then like, what's the point? I mean, you have to be able to have evidence for what you're doing and the work that you're doing, and it's crucial. It's crucial to be able to show the funders, to show HUD, to show the COC what it is you're doing. And this leads me to talk about, I'm going to skip down a couple slides because I do want to leave opportunities for questions. So I want to talk about what the system performance measures are. This is something that Brian and Jasmine both talked about earlier, but the SPMs are basically a measurement of how our system, of our homelessness services systems is doing in Alaska. And it's a measurement of those things. And so this is one of those moments where I'm going to show you where to find that data. So I'm going to take you on a little browser journey into this beautiful graph. So ICA is a really robust organization. We are the HMIS leads in 15 different states in the United States. And we have some amazing report writers and data analysts and data graphic people who know what the heck they're doing. Anyway, this is something that, this is a graph or a graphic that someone in Wisconsin actually created for all the states that participate in HMISs that ICA, my organization, administers. So I can just show you how this is like, you can break this down by COCs. So we'll just look at Alaska Balance of the State. Here at the top, there's this tab, and this is on the icalliances.org website, which I can guide you there in a bit. But this is a way for us to look at system performance within a period of time. Actually, let me filter all the years. So from fiscal year 2015 to fiscal year 2018, we can look at, for balance of state, what the numbers say. Now, these numbers increase or decrease or don't exist according to what services are provided, who's participating in HMIS or not. But this is showing, for instance, this annual count percentage. There was a change of 0.4% to 23.3% increase in homelessness or homeless shelter, emergency shelter utilization. Again, like I said, this could just be because more organizations are now participating in HMIS. But the point is that there is a need, right? Like there's obviously an issue here because these numbers are going up. That means that the needs are there. We can also talk about point in time, which is less of an indicator of what the homelessness issues are. It's one day in the year. And like we said before, weather could be a reason why those numbers might go down. It's not necessarily because homelessness has actually gone down. But anyway, this is an interactive graphic. You can go through and see new clients who've shown up in HMIS in a given year who were never experiencing homelessness before, who were never in the system before. We have clients who exited from different projects into permanent housing, the length of time that they were homelessness, and that's from that 3.917 I mentioned. So where did you sleep last night? How long were you there? Approximate date that you became homelessness, or that you started experiencing homelessness. Returns to homelessness, and then of course we track income to see, like, to gauge what it is that's contributing to instability with housing. I'm not going to take a deep dive into this, but it is here. It's a resource that's accessible to all of you. So please reach out to me, and we can talk more about this, but I'm going to head back over to my other thing. And maybe we'll get us there. Okay. It didn't take me back to where I wanted to go. Sorry. Okay, so then what are the SPMs telling us, or the system performance measures telling us? That one graphic is up through 2018, but this past year, Alyssa Parrish, my boss, ran some reports for us kind of last minute this past week and put together this awesome graphic about people who've entered into a situation, emergency shelter, whatever kind of project that is reflected in HMIS, where they were coming from, and then when they exited, where were they going? And so this graphic is able to tell us, kind of paints a good picture of what's successful versus what's not. So if I open up this graphic, this is also interactive. So if I click on this top one here for emergency shelter, it's showing me that last year, just in the calendar year, about 6,100 people were served in emergency shelter in the state. This is where they were before they came. So these are the graphics here to show where people were before, and then where they left at the time that they exited shelter. This last column here says missing information. And the reason why that is because in most of the shelters across the state, emergency shelters, especially the large ones, it's impossible, literally impossible to know where clients are going on any given night. There's a few actually. So there's the seasonal shelters, of course there's BFS, there's Fairbanks Rescue Mission. clients leave and they have no reason to report where they're going. Like there's no reason for that because you're providing a service, they got the service, and now they go. So that's why a lot of that information is missing here. So these smaller destinations here are usually the smaller organizations who are able to collect that data because they're working with much smaller number of clients. If we're looking at homelessness prevention, maybe if it's loading, we can see here similar kind of thing that what they were, well, this is a success story. So this graph here where they were exiting to is their own rental or home. So of the 4,000 people who were served, 3,200, about 3,300 left just back to their own place. So they were effectively prevented from becoming homeless. Coordinated assessment, we'll skip that. Some of the most common ones are like services only. So this would be things like things that are not rent or utility assistance. So like bus passes, transportation services, healthcare services, and things like that. So financial assistance that was provided for those purposes. A lot of these clients remain active so long as services are being provided to them in case management, ongoing case management. Anyway, this is an interactive chart you can see here, and this is also accessible to all of you, and your data lives here. It's for this past calendar year, 2019, so please reach out to me if you're interested in seeing more. It is for the state. I'm pretty sure this is for the entire state. So if we needed to, we could break it down by community or by COC, or however you'd like, actually. I'm going to jump back in here and give y'all a chance to see. Sorry, I'm navigating around. A couple more things. So improving the data, this is a big question because depending on the type of project you have or are operating or work for, it's maybe going to be impossible to improve the data, quite frankly. We do have these emergency shelters because the mass number of people who come and go in and out of these shelters, sometimes it's just impossible to get data from them, and accurate data at the very least. But one of the issues I've seen just across the board, regardless of the type of project serving clients, is that there's a disconnect between the people who are collecting the data and the people who are entering the data. And so this is where our data gets a little wonky. So we were talking earlier about last year how many clients in the state of Alaska were served with any of our homelessness and housing services. And I think 3,200 or something like that were fleeing domestic violence. I believe that number is much higher. And the reason why is because the people who are doing the data collection don't necessarily know to ask someone more intensive questions, basically like, okay, so you got kicked out of your house. Was it because you were being an a-hole, or was it because somebody was being an a-hole to you? And if someone was being an a-hole to you and you're a youth or you're a young adult, that's domestic violence. Someone has kicked you out of your home because they're being abusive towards you. So that's not being necessarily recorded in HMIS. So I think that those numbers are definitely lower than what we actually are able to see. The reason why there's that disconnect is because, again, the data collectors are not the same people as the data enterers. And so I think it's really important that we make connections within our organizations between leadership and the people who are doing that face-to-face contact with clients and that intensive work in case management, and making sure that they understand what the data standards are. Because the data standards are there for a reason. They tell a story, right? Like collecting prior living situation information helps us determine chronic homelessness. And so if our data collectors don't know about that and don't know why it's important, then they're not going to ask those questions, and they're not going to be able to assess that client effectively. And so my last pitch here is that anyone who's receiving COC, or HUD funding, any of these things, or who voluntarily enters into HMIS, ICA is an accessible resource to you all the time. In fact, we have organizations across the state who reach out to us all the time for their reporting needs, for just tech support when they're working in HMIS. If they have a question, if they just have any data-related things that need to happen, they reach out to us. But then there are other organizations who we never hear from. And so that can be discouraging sometimes because we see discrepancies in the data when we don't connect with and make or have ongoing conversations with organizations who are in the system. And so I think that's where the data issues really lie is just making the connections with the right people. So ICA with the organizations, and then feeling supported internally within the organizations, making sure that the staff and the case managers and the people working directly with clients feel like they are supported in this work. Because HMIS for so many organizations across the state is a crucial part of their work. And so if you're a case manager and you don't have time in a day to get that data in the system, then there's a data timeliness issue. And as time goes on, you're having to go back in time and enter that information, and then maybe the information has changed by now. So there's a lot of issues, and we just want to make sure that y'all know we're here to support your work however you need. Yeah, and I think that's it. So if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know that was a fast-paced thing, but we're at the end of the day, and y'all are probably just talked out at this point. Anyway, if y'all have questions about HMIS, please go ahead. Everyone's ready to go. icalliances.org/Alaska. This is where you can find a lot of these graphs and data. And then you can email our help desk. You can email me directly. All of that information is on our website, and I'm happy to provide support if you need it. Oh, Julia's good.
Is this working? Okay, there we go. I actually have a HMIS success story that I wanted to share really quickly because, okay, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. Bad data right here. I'm not entering it. I'm terrible. I get to that. But so recently we had a second section for choosing our routes under balance of state put into HMIS. And the thing that was really wonderful about this is I had 2 different participants that I could really track their movements around the state. One of whom screened in Anchorage and then ended up in Wrangell, and we were able to safely house because we were able to connect to them because of HMIS. And another one who had totally dropped out of the system when they were in another off-road community. OCS couldn't find them, nobody could find them, and then we found them and we were able to get them connected to services. So I'm not a data junkie. I think we need good numbers. I think that there are massive issues with the way that we collect data specifically for LGBTQ populations in the state. And I'm really grateful for a system that connects us no matter where we happen to be in the state so that we can really serve our people well.
Yeah. Thank you for telling us about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Holly mentioned earlier about SPMs and how they play into how HUD looks at our continuum of care program and how they're becoming more and more, more and more points are associated with how your system performance is looking as the years go by. There's a really cool tool on the ICA website, and I don't know if it's for Anchorage grantees, but for Balance of State, we asked them to run system performance measurements for the agencies, for the grantees themselves. Because we always get the question, what can we do as a grantee to help improve our overall continuum of care score? Well, understanding that your data and information is going into that larger pool of information that we're submitting up to HUD, it's really important to review those on a regular basis. And so when we kick off the COC competition this year in a few months, we're planning a call with all of our grantees to kind of discuss this, sort of a round table, one by one, to see what we can do and what resources we can provide as a coalition, best practices to help improve certain areas, and really just take a hard look inside of what we're doing well and what we aren't, maybe where areas we can improve. So definitely check that out if you're a COC grantee. And I don't know if Anchorage has one yet, but you guys should do it. It's awesome.
We have a question. Thanks, Brian.
I can't really see that, so I'm just curious.
Oh, sorry.
I work with elderly in Southeast, and so do you guys with that, when you track that, if you have an elder that's homeless that goes in the hospital and then from there goes where? Do you track that kind of thing? Like, do you track it to an assisted living home or to that far out?
So it's only not necessarily tracking, you know what I mean? Like, we're just collecting information about clients, but if an organization participates in HMIS, then yes, that they can potentially put that data in HMIS. However, because of HIPAA laws and things like that, there's some things that have to be protected, of course, and confidential. So I was talking about how it's a shared system, but there's some pieces of client records that are always closed down no matter what within an organization. So like you might be able to find a client record that was created by someone, you know, in Anchorage or Fairbanks or somewhere else in Southeast, but there are going to be pieces of that record that will be closed down because of things like HIPAA and other laws, VAWA laws, things like that. So it's, like I said before, there are people who use it voluntarily. And so if that was ever something that an organization wanted to do for the purposes that you're describing, that could be potentially done in HMIS. Mm-hmm. All right, well, y'all hit me up. I'm here the next couple days, and I've been letting people know that I'm accessible to you to do just like one-on-ones at any time. Set aside some time with me. I was at St. Vincent de Paul yesterday for 3 hours doing data stuff with them. I've got plans tomorrow to meet with a couple people to do HMIS stuff, so reach out to me, please, because I'm here for it. Thank you.